Reverse percentage is what we're going to look at in this video. It's split into 4 parts. So we're going to start off by looking at examples with percentage reduction, and then percentage increase, and then looking at the precise percentage amount, and then finally looking at questions of multiple reductions. And as always, we'll wrap up by looking at 2 real exam questions. So the way my videos work, I'm going to do the example on the left, which is I do, you are then going to press pause, and I've got the example on the right, which is you do. So in this first question, we've been told that the price of a book is reduced by 30%. The new price is £140. Work out the original price. Now, always bear in mind that the original price is always going to be 100%. We don't have 100%. We've been told the price is reduced by 30% and the new price is 140. So if you do 100%, take away 30, because that's what it's been reduced by, that leaves us with 70%. So we know that the new price is 70%. So we know that 70% is 140. So just to recap that, we know the price, which is always going to be 100%, has been reduced by 30%. That leaves us with 70%. And we've been told the new price is 140. And that's where this comes from. Now that we have that, we just have to get 100%. Now to get up to 100%, what we can do is we can find 1% and then we can find 100%. Now, so to find 1%, we're going to divide this side by 70. So we're going to do the same here. We're going to divide this side by 70. So if you do 140 divided by 70, you get 2. And now to get from 1 to 100, we're just going to times both sides by 100. So we know that the original price of this book was £200. After a 30% reduction, it came down to 140. Okay, that is how you do reverse percentage questions. So here again, we've been told the price of a toy is reduced by 20%. The new price is £320. Work at the original. So the price is always out of 100%. It's been reduced by 20, which leaves us with 80. So that means the price they've given us represents 80%. Now we want to get to 100%. So an easy way to do that is find 1% and then find 100%. So to find 1%, I'm just going to do 320, divided by 80. That gives me 4. And then I'm going to times each side by 100, and that gives me 400. So the final answer here is 400. And just for me to write that on, what I've done here is divided each side by 80. That gets me 1%, and then times each side by 100. So here's some practice questions. Press pause and have a go. Here are the answers, mark your work. And now moving on, we're looking at percentage increase questions. So we've been told the price of a book this time has been increased by 30%. So remember, the original amount is always out of 100%. Because it's been increased, we add 30% on. So it's gone beyond the original price. So that now becomes 130%. So we know 130% is what the new price is. And again, it's the exact same maths. We want to try to get back to 100%. So the easiest way to do that is find 1%. And then find 100%. Now to get to 1% from 130, you're going to divide this side by 130. So we do the exact same here. We divide this side by 130. So if I do 520, divide that by 130, I get 4. And then I times each side by 100. That gives me 400, which means the original price of the book was 400, and then it got increased by 30%. So the price of a toy is increased by 20%. The new price is 600. Work at the original price. So we do the same thing. Original price is always out of 100. 20% has been added on. So the question is telling us that 120% is equal to 600. We want to find 1% and then find 100%. So you just do 600, divide that by 120, and you get 5, and then times that by 100. That gives you 500. So the final answer is £500 is the original price. So here's some practice questions. Press pause and have a go. Here are the answers, mark your work. And now moving on. So you have to read these questions really carefully to understand what's been given. So the price of a book is increased by 30%. The 30% increase adds £120 on. Now this bit is really precise. What they're saying is that 30% represents £120. What is the original price? So we need to get back to 100%. So we need to find 1% and then 100%. Now, you have to read the question carefully because it does say here the 30% adds 120. So they've told us what the 30% represents. So divide each side by 30. That gives us 1%. And then times each side by 100. That gives you 100%. So the price of the book, the original price of the book was £400. The price of a toy is increased by 20%. The 20% increase adds £80 on. So we've been told the 20% increase represents £80. we want to find 100%, so we can find 1%, and then from 1% we can just go to 100. That becomes 4, and again the answer here is also 400. It just happens that the answer to a few of these questions has been 400. So here's some practice questions. Press pause and have a go. Here are the answers. Mark your work. Moving on. Now this is an important note here. So if you look at the question on the left first, we've been told the price of a book is reduced by 50%. The new price is £10. Now we know percentage is out of 100%. It's been reduced by 50%. That leaves to 50%. So we know that 50% represents the £10. Now to go from 50 to 100, we can just double it, right? So that means the original price of this book was £20. Now that is not the same as doing what we're doing on the right here. Reducing the price of a book by 20 and 30% is not the same as reducing it by 50%, okay? Because what's happened here on the left is, if I draw this out, you have the original price, which is there, and we reduce it by 50%, and we end up with the final price, which we've been told in the question is £10, okay? Whereas what we have on the right is a little bit different. We have two stages of reduction. So we have the price, it's reduced by 30%. We then get a new price. That price is then reduced by 20%, and then we get a final answer of £10. That's given in the question, okay? So here we worked back in one step. We went from 10 straight back there. Here we have to work back in two steps. You have to go from here to here. Then when we get this answer, we have to go from here to here. So to answer the question on the right with multiple reductions, we first look at going backwards. We know the price was reduced by 20%. So if we go back one step, we know that 80% is what represents £10, because the price has been reduced by 20%. So we don't have the full 100. So if I find 1% of this and then 100%, so 10 divide that by 80 becomes 0.125. And then if I times that by 100, that becomes £125. Okay, and this is key. We're going to do this in two steps. So that now I know what goes in this box here. So in fact, I can just write that in. I know this is 125. So I've now come here, and now I need to go back to the original price, which is there. And I know that this 125 here was reduced by 30%. So I know it represents 70%. So I know that 70% is 125. And again, I'll find 1% of this and then 100%. So 125, divide that by 70, and you end up with a decimal answer, which is 1.785714, and then times that by 100, and then you end up with 178.57 to two decimal places. So there's two steps in this. That is key, okay? You have to read the question carefully, and this bit here is key. The fact that doing this is not the same as doing 50%, because it happens in two stages. So moving on. Now again, reading this question carefully, the price of the trainers is reduced by 20%, then the price is reduced again by 25%, and the final price is 36. So what we need to do is go from here to here, get that answer, and then go from here to here. So we know, looking backwards, if we look at this line here, the price is reduced by 20%, 25% to get £36. So we know the £36 represents price is always out of 100. Minus that from 25, that gives us 75%. So the £36 represents 75%. Now we need to get to 100%. So you find 1%, and then you find 100%. So you just do 36, divide that by 75, and you end up with 0.48, and 100% will become £48. Okay, so we've done this bit, and we've got an answer. We can in fact just write it here. We can write the answer as 48. Now we need to go back to this step. So we now know that the £48 represents, so if I do 100% minus 20%, that gives me 80%. So I know that 80% represents the £48. And now again, I need to do the same thing, and then I will get my answer. So if I do 48, divide that by 80, that gives me 0.6. And if I times that by 100, that gives me 60. And that is our final answer. It's £60. So that means the price was £60. It was reduced by 20%, which got me to 48, which was then reduced by 25%, which got me to 36. Okay, so that's where we started, the 36. We went one step back, we got the 48. We went one step back, we got the 60. So looking at the question on the right, we're going to go one step back. So we know that percentage is out of 100. So the 63%, because it's been reduced by 10%, it only represents 90%. So 90% is 63. And if you go from there to 1% and then 100%, so 63, divide that by 90, and you end up with 0.7, times that by 100, and you end up at 70. So we've done that now, so that's 70. We now need to go back here. So again, 100% is what the price is out of. Now, because 30% has been reduced, that means it represents 70%. So we know that 70% represents £70. So we need to find 1% and then 100%, and that is our final answer. So divide each side by 70, and that just becomes 1. And then times each side by 100, and that becomes 100. So the final answer is £100. So again, what's happened here is the price, the original price was 100, it got reduced by 30%, and it became 70, and then it got reduced by 10%, and it became 63. And that's where the 63 was in the question. So we got the 63, and we went back to here, and then back to there. So here's some practice questions. Press pause and have a go. Here are the answers. Mark your work. Now here's 2 exam questions for you to have a go at. Press pause and have a go, and then I'll go through them. So I'm going to go through the first one now. So in this case, Jerry bought a house in 2003, and then he sold it to me in 2007, and then Mia sold the house for $162,000, and she made a loss in 2012. How much did she pay? Did Jerry pay for the house in 2003? So you can see you're working back, and there's multiple steps. So we're starting off here. Well, what does that represent? She made a loss of 10%. So that means this represents 90%. So we can do 100%, take away 10%, take away 90%. So 90% represents 162,000. So now I need to find 100%. So 162,000, divide that by 90 becomes 1,800, which then becomes 180,000. So that's this bit done. And now going backwards, when Jerry sold the house to me, he made a 20% profit. So we know that 100, so the price 100 plus 20, because he made a profit, is 120%. So we know the 120% represents 180,000, because that's how much he sold it to Mia for. And now we need to do the same thing. Find 1%, find 100%, and we'll have our answer. And that becomes 150, and that becomes 150,000. So that is our final answer. Again, we worked back in 2 steps. So in this case, it was interesting because there was a profit here. So we had to add that on. So we worked back here, and then from here, we worked back there. And again, you can think of it in the same way. So the price that we had at the end was the 162,000, but we knew that she had made a loss of 10%. So we worked back from the loss, and we knew that the original price she paid would have been higher because she made a loss. And in the case of Jerry, she made a profit, so we knew the price was going to be higher. And in her case, it was a plus 20%. And that's how we went from there to there, and then there to there. So with this question, again, similar approach. So he's got this car that's losing value. It loses 12.5% in the first year, and then 10% in the second 2 years. At the end of 3 years, the car's value was 17,000. Okay, so we have to work backwards. So what's the last thing that happened? So it lost. So we know, again, if I was to write this out, we have something here, and then it lost 12.5%, and then we have this here, and then it lost 10% in this year, and then we have this here, and then it lost 10% again, and then we have the final price in the question, which is 1,000. And again, all you now need to do is work back, and you get your answer. So we know that 17,010 represents 90% because it lost 10% of its value. So all I need to do is work out 100%. In fact, I've written that the wrong way around. So I'll just, well, it's not the wrong way around, but if I'm putting the percentages on the left. So there we go. So if I just divide 17010, divide that by 90, times that by 100, so that becomes 18,900. So that'll be 189. Cool. So I've got this value now. I'll put that in. And again, I've got to do the same thing, work one step back. So because it lost 10% here, that means 90% represents this. So 18,900 divided by 90, that gives us 210. So that's 210,000. Sorry, 21,000. And now we know that from here to here, car lost 12.5%. So we know that, again, percentage is out of 100. So it represents 87.5% is the 21,000. And again, we need to work to 100%. So we can find 1%. So if you divide 21,000, divide that by 87.5, you get 240. And then that becomes 24,000. And that is our final answer. So that is how much he bought the car for. So he bought the car for 24,000. It lost 12.5%. Then it lost 10%. And then it lost 10% again. So if you would like some more practice on this, I've got a full worksheet on this, linked down in the comments below. And if you found this video useful, I've got loads of other content in the exact same format. Do check it out.